Well, this is impossible. I don't know. Alright, so the story didn't end there. So while Alexander was shredding through the Persian Empire, Antipater was left in charge of the army that was back at home in Macedonia. And though there was no official title for Olympias, there is evidence that shows she was buying grain from a foreign nation, so we can assume she had some say in foreign affairs and citizen well-being, while also maintaining her religious roles. But eventually, both Antipater and Olympias thought that the other was overstretching their power. Both were constantly writing to Alexander complaining about the other, and though it's not for certain, we can assume Alexander trusted his mother more, as her power was directly dependent on her son being king, so she really didn't have a motive to gain too much power. But Antipater did have a reason to want Alexander off the throne. You see, as Alexander was conquering the known world, he started drinking a whole lot. Then he started to believe that maybe he wasn't Philip's real son, instead believing that he really could be the son of Zeus. Pair that with also getting extremely paranoid, killing people around him that he assumed were plotting against him. Eventually, Alexander started taking Olympias's warnings that Antipater was trying to take over a bit more seriously. So he sent Antipater a message saying, "Hey man, I need some more troops. If you can send some more, that'd be cool. Oh, and, you know, you should come too. I haven't seen you in a while. I miss you, Now, Antipater over the years kept getting messages from people saying, "Yo, Alexander's acting a little bit weird." So he assumed it was a trap, and he sent his son Cassander to go and check out the situation. Now, Cassander had known Alexander for a long time now. In fact, they were in the same tutoring class together, being taught by Aristotle when they were kids. But when Cassander got to Alexander, he saw him with Persians bowing to him. Now, imagine you see your goofy buddy from school sitting on a throne with people bowing around him. Would you laugh? Maybe jive with him a bit, haha, you should have known this guy when he was in school. Well, Cassander did that, and, this was the result. Sometime after this, Alexander mysteriously dies, most likely from poison, but like a lot of things in this story, it's not concrete. Olympias' situation had changed. She immediately put the blame on Antipater, and her daughter Cleopatra began working out their next move. So, you got a bunch of generals that are competing against each other to be the guy that takes care of the empire while they wait for Alexander's son that he had with a Persian wife, creatively named Alexander IV, to become old enough to rule, or to help Philip's mentally limited son Aridaeus rule. One of these guys was Perdiccas, who had been given Alexander's ring while he was dying, basically saying, "Take care of the empire until my son grows up." Perdiccas married Antipater's daughter, but Olympias was trying to work out a deal for him to marry Cleopatra, the one who married her brother, but he died in Italy in battle. Though Perdiccas married Antipater's daughter, he still seemed interested in Olympias' offer. After all, Cleopatra was Alexander's only full sister, meaning the one who ended up marrying her would, in return, have the most legitimacy. Antipater heard of these backdoor dealings, and it led to war. Perdiccas died after being assassinated by one of his officers, and Cleopatra was basically held hostage for the rest of her life by Antipater in Sardis. Unluckily, Olympias had lost her biggest bargaining chip. But, luckily, Antipater, soon after this, died of old age, so new opportunity arose. Antipater gave supreme command to a guy named Polyprocon instead of his son Cassander, and Polyprocon wanted Olympias as an ally because she was the only one that was connected to the two former kings. He wanted her to help make sure that baby Alexander IV lives to become king, and it was a long shot, but it's the only chance she had. Meanwhile, Cannae, daughter of Philip II, from one of his Illyrian wives, Adada, was trying to arrange a marriage between her daughter, Adea Eurydice, and Philip Aridaeus, which was another route to legitimacy. But Kanane died in a scuffle while she was traveling, so it was just Adea Eurydice. The sides had been made. Olympias, Polyprocon, and Alexander IV on one side, Adea Eurydice, Philip Aridaeus, and Cassander, who was somewhere in the Peloponnese on campaign at the time, were on the other. Now, Adea Eurydice wasn't raised the same way other women might have been at this time. She was Illyrian, and she was trained in hand-to-hand combat. She was a warrior, but she had never commanded her own army, but she had one now. And Olympias was on her way with an army of her own. The two sides met each other at the border of Macedonia and Molossia and stared each other down. On one side, Adea Eurydice, kitted out with armor, sword, and shield. On the other, Olympias, who showed up dressed as a follower of Dionysus, probably with snakes wrapped around her wand and stuff like that. The other side saw this, and understandably were like, man, I want to be on that team. So they dropped their weapons and joined Olympias. Olympias then did another Godfather-esque killing spree, but it rubbed a few people the wrong way because she held Philip Aridaeus and Adea Eurydice hostage for a while, which was a big no-no for royalty. Eventually she got around to killing them. She ordered Aridaeus to be stabbed for a warrior's death, and left Eurydice with options to kill herself in private, to which she chose to hang herself. Now, Cassander was big mad because Olympias is killing a lot of people that was in his faction, so he marched from the Peloponnese with his army, winning battle after battle against the armies that Olympias was sending to stop him. Cassander eventually made it to Macedonia, and Olympias realized her situation, so she surrendered on the promise that she would live. Cassander said sure, and Olympias spent the rest of her days in a kind of dungeon area, but she was permitted maids because of her royalty. Then there's a bunch of interpretation as to how she died. One says that she was turned over to the Macedonians that were mad at her, and she was stoned to death. I don't like that one. There's a few other, but my personal favorite is that she saw armed men approaching her that was sent to kill her, and she went to meet them, dressed in royal attire with her two maids, and the would-be assassins were surprised by this and either froze up from fear of her mystical powers and abilities, or it reminded them of the importance of the royal family. Either way, she managed to escape death for the moment. But Cassander had already sent other men to go and finish the job. She walked up to these other men with their daggers out and allowed them to stab her in public in a kind of forced suicide. It is said that you could see Alexander in his dying mother's eyes, but I believe what they mean is they saw the eyes of someone who was ruthless, intimidating, and mystical, someone who had raised the conqueror to be who he was. Then I bet they wet themselves, but hey, that's all an interpretation, don't take it from me. So yeah, go women, am I right, guys? I said, am I right, guys?